Hello, I am Alethea Lyons. You can call me Thea, author of The Hiding. And in September, I am running a couple of live events with some author friends, doing some readings from our fantasy and horror novels. So I thought I should probably check that the technology works first. So if this goes horribly wrong, this is a test run. So to test it out, I'm going to be reading a few pages from The Hiding, which is a contemporary dark fantasy set in an alternate version of York. And the scene I'll be reading from is about halfway through, but there's no spoilers. Basically, the main character and her sister have been investigating a string of murders, and this has led them to the Guild of Ghostwalkers, where they've been having a bit of a poke around, and they have been caught. So without further messing around, I shall read to you from The Hiding. The cemetery was pitch black, but for the wavering light of the guard's torch. Even that thin beam of brightness didn't reassure Harper. Rather, it created more darkness, throwing long shadows behind each blade of grass. Darkness piled upon darkness, pressing in, consuming, suffocating. Clouds overpowered the moonlight as the stars twinkled out, handful by handful. Panic welled inside Harper, the sense of disconnect and loss the dark always summoned. Wary of what could lurk between the gravestones, frozen, pretending to be stone, hiding behind edifices of death. It didn't matter that she didn't believe in ghosts. What mattered more was whether they believed in her. Grace took her hand, their fingers linked as they picked their way between tombstones. The guard prodded Harper with his baton. "Don't tell us the Archbishop's lackeys are afraid of some wee ghosties. I thought you lot didn't believe in the undead." One of the men laughed, pushing Harper forward. Grace knocked his baton away with her free hand. Her knuckle dusters rang like a funeral bell as metal struck metal. Harper fingered the hilt of the machete at her hip, not wanting to draw it on another human. It was likely she and Grace would win in a fight, even without weapons. Yet she didn't want to fight her own kind. I'm a witch who hunts supernaturals. Which side should I be on? Grace went ahead of her, arm reached back, fingers still entwined. She trod carefully, her usual swagger gone. Torchlight caught her spiked stilettos. Practicality was not a DeSantos watchword. We've been doing this too long, gotten too confident. Grace's heels sank into the grass, mud glistening as they ripped free. Focusing on the sparkle of light against patent leather, Harper tried to forget the crushing black above and the rotting dead below. Near the center of the cemetery, the guard in front held up a hand. Harper's heart thudded in her chest, her breath heavy as though she'd run for miles. The man pointed to a white marble mausoleum, lit by floodlights to catch every intricately sculpted face and flower that adorned it. "That's where we're going, ladies," he said. "A pretty tomb for two pretty girls, if the master undertaker isn't satisfied with your story." Harper wasn't sure if the shiver down her back was her own or a judder escaping from Grace's body into hers. "You're a creep." Grace may have been trembling, but her voice was strong. Never show fear. That's what Gabriel, Grace's oldest brother, always said to them. Never show fear, no matter how dark it is, no matter how strong your enemy. Never show fear. "But feel fear," Miguel, the next oldest, would chime in. "Feel fear. It's God's warning. It keeps you alive." The guard should have felt more fear. When Grace gave Harper's hand a Morse code squeeze, she spun into action. Grabbing the end of the nightstick, Harper used the momentum of the man's swing to pull him off balance and topple him over her hip. A whimper came from behind her as Grace's knuckle dusters impacted vulnerable flesh. When Harper's rival tried to stand, she knocked him back with a swift kick to the solar plexus, leaving him gasping for breath on the ground. Grace's opponent lay curled in a fetal position, clutching his groin, emitting a high-pitched moan. The victor dusted off her hands with a self-satisfied smirk. Her family fought more than animalistic soups. They fought the humanoids ones too, the ones hiding in plain sight, who were as susceptible as anyone to a swift kick between the legs. Hurt them, disable them, live to fight another day, Father DeSantos had said as they drilled in the garden. This is no honourable fight between gentlefolk. This is a fight for survival. Your survival, and the survival of others. Fight dirty. Fight to win. Harper picked up the fallen torch, her palm so slick she almost dropped it. Despite Father's words, violence made her uneasy. Thank heaven for Grace, who wasn't scared of the dark, and who had no inhibitions about using whatever means necessary to get her own way. Grace casually poked one of the guards with the pointed toe of her shoe. He contorted his body away from her with a groan, but stayed down. "Thank you so much for escorting us," she said. "Such a polite introduction to your master undertaker. You've been such a gentleman. If either of you ever dares hit my sister again, you won't get away with a simple bruising. I'll break your sorry—" "Good evening, ladies." A disembodied voice interrupted Grace's tirade. It rolled through the air, mellow yet commanding, quiet yet overpowering. Both women instinctively turned to it. Harper swung the torch around, catching an apparition in its beam. It appeared as a man, black cloth against black night, so it was hard to judge his size or era. His feet did not deign to touch the floor. His black cloak billowed in an unfelt breeze. A stovepipe hat disappeared up into the darkness, and vapours clung to him with the desperate fingers of a jilted lover, grasping yet sliding off. Only his face was clearly visible, hanging suspended in the air like the man in the moon come down to earth. His skin was wrinkled yet timeless, creasing around his frown as though it knew no other expression. His eyes were black as his garments. Dilated pupils mocked the torchlight. Irises expanded resentfully into white. Inhuman, ghostly, deadly. Harper's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes burned with sight as spirits escaped from the graves to stretch pleading hands toward him. Translucent and white, they thronged around him, some scornful, some fawning. Their whispers carried on the winds, too many to count, too many to hear their words. A susurration building to the crescendo of a waterfall, plummeting, falling. Harper heard one voice through the crowd, one far-off person calling her name. Then there was nothing but darkness. Well, thank you for joining me for this little test run and this little reading of The Hiding. If you enjoyed that, then please check out my social media. You can get it in ebook, hardback like this pretty one, or paperback through your local bookstore or through Amazon. Hopefully we will see some of you for the Reawakening tour, where I'll be reading some short stories that come just after this book, but I promise there won't be any spoilers.